Welcome to the October meeting for the St. Louis Woodworkers Guild. I'm Bill Schucott, Vice President. Normally this meeting would be conducted by our president, but he had a medical procedure and his doctor has advised him to not be out in public for a little while. For anybody that has any comments or questions as we go along, you can, if you're on YouTube, you can make comments through YouTube and we'll be monitoring those. Or if you're not on YouTube, you can go to comments at SLWG.org and we'll be monitoring those as well. Since March, we have not had a regular meeting. Instead, we've been sponsoring virtual presentations. This live presentation on YouTube is a step to move to get back to regular meetings. The format will be like a regular meeting with committee reports, show and tell, and a presentation by a guild member. What happened? No, it's okay. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Vicki Berry, who is going to give the Toy Committee report for us.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight in our experimental broadcast of our meeting. I am very proud of where we're at and what we're doing on the Toy Committee despite the restrictions that we have and the fact that we had a couple of months where our organizations weren't accepting toys from us. So, where are we? Well, in October we collected 261 toys and we have delivered 460. And again, we have organizations that are not accepting deliveries, so these are great numbers. Year to date, we've collected 4,577, and we have delivered year to date 4,314. So despite our obstacles, we are doing great. And if you run the numbers since 1994, well over 74,000 have been delivered to our partners, mainly our children's hospitals. So where are we? Well, we've delivered 60% of our target, and that target was a little over 7,400. So we've delivered, as I said, 4,300 to date. And we had set a goal of 22% member participation. And I'm happy to say, we're doing good. We're at 11%. So those are, I think, acknowledged numbers that everyone should be proud of. But we also had a few folks that lead the pack. And first one is our president, Wayne Humphrey. In fact, Wayne has submitted 1,245 items. Bill Muth, over 750. In fact, his number is 801. Rich Sanders, one of our continual leaders in the pack, is at 564. And then we have a number that are over 100, and many of those are 200 and close to 300. So thank you to not just these major contributors, but to all of our contributors. Thank you. Well, what kinds of things are people donating? Well, this was a little rocking horse, and it rocks. We have a couple of trucks, an elephant, a cat, a butterfly, some dinosaurs, and the famous arches, and then a toolbox with some actual tools. So, it's a variety, and as I've said over and over, all skill levels can contribute. Don't feel you have to be an expert at creating toys. So where do they go? Well, Toys for Tots is coming up as our December, or actually November is when we make our contribution. We'd love to have some of the bigger, more finished toys for them. Children's Hospital, I think that's one of our original organizations. And then we added Foster and Adoptive Care Coalition a couple of years ago. We are in partnership with the Rockwood School District, where it's an interesting program where kits are built of parts and instructions written up by us, and we give them to the kids. They have to follow the directions and use some tools and put them together, and then they donate them back to us for distribution to our partners. Shriners is another hospital that receives our items. So does Mercy, Cardinal Glennon, and Rankin Jordan. So those are our partners, and again, we want to thank everyone for all you do. Bill, I'm turning it back over to you, I believe.
Thank you, Vicki. The next part of the program is the book box program that we do, where we're teamed up with Bring Me a Book St. Louis. Normally Tom Tierney would make this presentation, but he's in quarantine through a second or third exposure to somebody in his family who had a positive test, so he's not here tonight. The Build Me a Book, or the Bring Me a Book Box program donates quality books to underserved children in the age range of pre-kindergarten through first grade. The Guild builds small boxes for these kids to have at home that act like their library shelves. And the book team cuts up major pieces of plywood and distributes those as kits to members who then assemble them and finish them. Sorry guys, there's supposed to be a slide here that showed the history of the project, but I'm not seeing the slide come up. The Build-A-Box program has been very successful. We've made over 1,000 boxes since the start of the program. At this point, we have 150 boxes in inventory, and the Bring Me a Book people have said they didn't want us to prepare any more boxes since the inventory is pretty large, so we probably won't be building any more boxes until the spring. We also do outreach projects for the Foster Care Coalition. Part of that program is that we have been building little boxes for the foster kids to keep their personal items. These children don't have a home, and these storage boxes that we've been giving them are larger enough to put papers and trinkets, so they have some place that is truly their own. We also do a program with the Rockwood schools. We have partnered, Vicki sort of stole my thunder on this one. We've partnered with a teacher in the Rockwood program and put together kits for the children to assemble. So basically we're doing the milling and they're doing the gluing and screwing to put the toys together. We've also had guild members who participate in the class where the children are putting these together, In a typical semester, we're putting together about 100 toys. They are putting it together. And then when they're done, they donate the toys back to us, and we include them for distribution to the hospitals and the other parts of the toy program. This last semester, each of the children put a personal note to the recipient of the toy, expressing how much they appreciate what these children are going through, and it's been a very nice aspect of the program. Membership, as you can see on this slide, has been holding very steady at about 245. We have 168 regular members and 77 full-time shop members. The full shop membership is a little more expensive than the regular membership, but allows that member to have unlimited use of the guild shop whenever there are open shop hours. Some recent classes and presentations that the Guild has put on include the September meeting, where we had a presentation by an outside expert, Bob Lang, who did a very interesting talk on the arts and crafts furniture style. We also had a SketchUp class that originally was started last June, and we followed that up with 2 meetings in the last month for an advanced SketchUp class, which some of the SketchUp users requested be made available. That's going to be an ongoing program with classes every week or 2, depending on availability of the members of the class, and that is progressing very nicely. Alex Gerberding, one of our new members, volunteered to teach this advanced class, and he's proven to be a very, very good instructor. Kudos to him. This isn't showing, David. As they say on network TV, technical difficulties. Okay. Upcoming classes and presentations. The November meeting, it should be a very interesting one. Dr. Michael Ogilvie from Washington University is going to make a presentation on woods that are used in musical instruments. His specialty is guitars, but I told him I was interested in building a violin. He said I could benefit from the presentation as well.
Hey Bill, Cecil Dean would like to see a beginner's SketchUp classes. Do you want to talk about that?
Cecil, I appreciate that. I've been... What? Oh, Cecil Dean is asking, when are we going to have another beginner's SketchUp class? Another beginner's SketchUp class is in the offing, but at the moment I'm searching for someone to be the instructor for that. So as soon as we get that lined up, it'll be in the schedule. Just keep watching what's on the website, and we'll be sending out email notices as well. There is another advanced SketchUp class scheduled for a week from yesterday the 21st. If you're interested in that, go ahead and sign up on the website. Those classes only cost $10, so it's a pretty good deal. Originally, I said that we needed some skills to join this advanced class, but at this point, I've backed that down. So if you are familiar enough with SketchUp to simply do navigation, feel free to jump in and we'll give you a hand as we move through the project we're working on. Upcoming classes are shown on this. It includes the fundamentals class that Wayne Watson puts on every month. There's the advanced SketchUp class, and then there's some new series of classes that we've added. We're offering some beginner classes in certain types of equipment, and these are held either before or after an open shop day. We had two last weekend, one on the table saw that was presented by Adam Connors, and one on the bandsaw that was presented by yours truly. There are a couple more coming up in November. Feel free to sign up for them. They've been a lot of fun, and we're hoping that those will be beneficial to some of the more novice woodworkers in our group. At this point, we're going to jump into show and tell, and the first teller is David Zeman, and I'll hand the presentation over to him.
Good evening, YouTube. This is fun. So, back in July, at the beginning of July, I built this cutting board. It is my second ever cutting board. It's an end grain cutting board made out of cherry, maple, and walnut. I built this thing for my dad for his birthday, and it was one heck of a challenge with the tools that I had available. That's what I'm looking for. I'm hoping this works. So I designed it with Cutting Board Designer. It's a free Windows program that lets you, lay it out, and it built that piece of paper that you can see on the screen. Hal, are we showing? Okay, great. Yeah, so that piece of paper next to the first cutout, that is how I laid out and prepared all of the different slices that I would need to make. Oh, I was hoping that would work. Okay, so after I made the first layer of cuts, I did a standard glue up. That, and at this point it's all pretty much just table saw. Everyone knows how to do that. Normally you would then send it through a planer or a drum sander or something like that, which I was able to use Tom Tierney's. He let me come over to his shop and do that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I did that for the first round, but then after I did the second glue up, this one, I didn't want to go back there. We were in the middle of COVID. I wasn't real comfortable with it, at which point I decided it was time to try and use a router jig to plane and joint the surface, which is how I ended up with those lines. But they're nowhere near, you can see, if you just change the lighting a little bit, they don't look anywhere near as severe. And here you can actually get a good view where, even though the lighting really makes it look as though those deviations are significant. It didn't take but about, I'm gonna say, didn't seem all that bad. It only took about 30 minutes per side with a handheld belt sander to get a perfect finish, what I have here. So then I just did router on the sides and router table to get the handle in, and mineral oil finish. So yeah, it was good fun. If you ever want to plane something really big like this, and you don't have a 3-foot wide planer or jointer, then it is definitely possible to do it with a router jig.
Thank you, David. You're going to outshine me because you had a slide presentation to go with your show and tell, and I don't. My show and tell item is a child's tricycle that I made that'll be part of the Toys for Tots contribution. It's an interesting project in that it involves more skills and different kinds of skills than I frequently use for making toys for the program. Namely, there are a number of round items and some things that have to be done on a lathe. The wheels I did by drawing them on the board and cutting near the line with a bandsaw and then truing them up from a center, working on a disc sander. And the spindle and the handle were in fact truly turned. I'm fortunate enough to have a shopsmith that I inherited from my father, the real old one with the wooden base. But it makes a very nice lathe, and I have some tools that I bought with my dad probably about 1960. So had those for a long time, honed them a little bit, and they were plenty sharp, so that worked just fine. It goes together with screws through the major pieces, and then it's also glued. It has 5/16 threaded rods for the axles, and it makes for a pretty nice toy. I was very pleased with the way it came out. We did a weekend class for Toys for Tots, and we made half a dozen of these along with about the same number of child rocking horses.
Are the plans on the website? Are those plans on the website?
I don't know if those plans are on the website or not, but if not, we'll get them on the website. At this point, I'll turn the program back to Vicki, who is going to show us some of what she's been doing recently.
Okay, I have my own Vanna White here tonight, but first I have to say, when I'm not woodworking, I knit. So this is one of my sweater creations. Okay, so back in February, I took Don Iverson's poured resin make a tray class. And I knew when I did that this was the gift that I wanted to make for my girlfriends, where I have a luncheon every Christmas time and make them something that's special. So that was what I decided I wanted to make. So I had a dozen I needed to make. So I had to get into a mass production mode. So while I don't have a slide presentation, I bought enough of the samples that I did to kind of talk you through the evolution of how I started and what I learned along the way and what I ended up with. So all of the wood, well, most of this wood came from members who dropped them off at one of our meetings, and it was live edge, and I said, oh, I think I need that. So I picked up a bunch of live edge wood. I'm not sure what it is, maybe an oak, I'm not sure. But this is one of the first charcuterie trays that I did. And it's not a cutting board, but it's for meats and cheeses and fruits. So it is finished with poly, and then actually last night I went back and did a little light sanding and put some of that walrus oil that we got from one of our new sponsors. If you had gone to the David Stein open house, President Wayne had some. So here's what I learned. I learned that on the frame that I made to pour the resin, we learned to use a plastic because this resin, the epoxy, doesn't stick to plastic. Well, unless you get a really good seal around your edges, this stuff leaks everywhere. And it did. It leaked so much and it was so ugly, I had to take it into the shop to the bandsaw and slice off all the bad. And that was okay, but then it meant I had to do sanding and sanding and sanding and more sanding, and started even with like 40 and then 60, then 80. 120 is what Don said you should be okay with. Well, I went on up to 220s and some 300s and 400s and 800 because when you do the front, and that all had to be sliced off and sanded, in order to get that really shiny surface, you have to do a lot of sanding. And I even bought some 5,000 wet sandpaper to use. I don't think I used it on one of these, or on these first ones, but I did on some of the later ones. So this is one that I did. I'm really happy with it. And then the next one that I did that was similar, a little smaller, where I finally went with the blue. And this blue has a little sparkle in it. But what you have to also do is seal your live edges before you do any pours. And then I found if you do maybe 2 or 3 pours, you can really control the bubbles and the finish. So again, this is one that I had to slice off the back. And you can see it does turn out pretty nice, but it does require a lot of sanding. Next up, actually this is one of the later ones I did because I ran out of this nice wood, and I went up to, I forget his. Who's our guy we like? No, the hardwood. Anyway, and all he had available was some pine. So this is a pine one. And what I learned by the time I got to these is how to do a pour without having to do sanding on the top. And you finish it, started with this coral color, then I came back and did coral and black and kind of marbled it. And then the very last pour, which is maybe 1/8 of an inch, is just clear. And that's where you can really get some depth when you look at these straight down. But I'm not happy with the color, and I may come back and add another stain to it, but it's also poly, and then finish with that walrus. The round one, I thought I'd try a round one. So, you know, you think, well, how the heck do you do an edge? Well, I cut a piece of, oh, that's not true. By then, I had figured out if you buy a piece of silicone mat, thank goodness for Amazon, and use that as the bottom part for your frame, your resin doesn't stick to that. So you get a real nice bottom. And I just brought the edge of that silicone mat up, put some clamps, and was able to do a pour in there. And it's basically black, but I also put in a kind of a sparkle navy blue. And it's just a little, and then it too has some poly on it, and then I came back last night and put that walrus on it. So this is walnut, because I got it from the walnut guy up in, I think he's in St. Charles. This one you could use as a cutting board, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so I tried round. Then, at that same walnut guy store, I found a couple of pieces of walnut, but it also had a lot of, I guess they're wormholes or insect holes or some kind of hole. Anyway, so it created a lot of little imperfections on the top. And these are also ones where I started getting much better at the pours and would bring them in multiple pours. This one is a purple and blue, and then finished it again with that clear on top. So it is also one where I confess I did have to go out to the shop, run it through the planer, but then it just sands up really nice. So the back is, I think, pretty good. The most expensive part of all of these suckers were the handles. After the resin, whatever that is. Anyway, here's another one. This time a little more of the ocean blue. And this is where I started getting fancy and doing a little white, like it's the water rushing against the shore. You see a lot of YouTubers do that. They never really show how they do it, so it was just a matter of trial and error, but I think I did okay. Then here's another one. Again, this is one of the later ones, and later one means last week, where I used a copper color and black and just kind of marbled them in. But again, that last pour up to the edge is clear. So I would say if I learned anything, that's probably the best secret, is to make that final pour really clear. Here is a sample of the back where I did not have to really do any planing, just a little sanding. The silicone mat gives you a real nice matte finish. So if you want it shinier, you can. When I sent this one through the planer, because I think this is one where my pieces of wood were not exactly the same thickness, I sniped the end, so don't tell Shop Wayne, but it worked okay. And then this is the last one where I was rummaging through my stack of wood and found this piece of wood. I don't know what it is, but I really like it. And nobody's getting this one but me. So it's another one where I was able, I think, to master the water rushing against the shore with the white. And again, that last pour clear, but there's also, when you look closely, there's two layers and shades of blue in this one to give it even more depth. So those are some of the lessons I learned. If anyone has ever any questions, I'm happy to share some of my other tips, but it was fun to do. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about process and even created my first official little jig to drill the holes for the handles. And it went well, and I'm really pleased that I was able to do that. So that's my show and tell.
Nice job, Vicki.
Thanks.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for the evening. Don Turner is a member of the Guild. He is a retired engineer from, is it Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, whatever you want to call it these days. And he's been retired for 5 years and actually has a business making cabinets and furniture. So anybody needs anything, send your request directly to him.
After mine.
After yours, Vicki.
So let me get this out of your way.
We'll clear the deck and let Don have at it.
All right, so we'll get started here. So I made a couple little models here just for fun, and never mind the ugly hinges here that are on this, but we'll get to that later. So I am going to be teaching a course late in November, Thanksgiving weekend. It's kind of a funny weekend to be doing it, but we've got a few students. So to start, my background, again, as he said, I was a retired engineer. I've been woodworking since high school, and believe me, it's a frightening number of years. I don't even want to talk about it because it scares me. But I don't understand retirement, so I started woodworking in 2016, the business in 2016 it was started. I've built a few furniture pieces, but mostly it's cabinetry. That's where the customers take me. They just want cabinets. And then I partnered with another person who works with me on installations, because when you put these uppers up, I only have 2 arms, so I can't hold it and put screws in at the same time. So he's a really great expert at installation. So that's kind of his bailiwick. So we'll just hop right into it. Some of the cabinet basics in design. Using a CAD program, you don't have to have it, but boy, is it really helpful. It's not necessary, but the number of errors you make, you're still going to make errors, but instead of having 25 errors, you have 2 or 3. It's a big deal. It really does help a lot when you're catching it, because if you're putting some parts together and they kind of go like that, and it's like, well, that doesn't go in there, then you need to fix it and get your model right. And then when you make your drawings from it, take it down to the shop, you have a good chance of making everything work just fine. The other thing is on a medium-sized kitchen, it's going to take about 400 to 500 parts. When you take into account all the different pieces you've got to make, and then there's drawers and there's slides, and then the cabinets go together. So there's a lot that goes into building a full kitchen, for example. So having a CAD program really helps you organize and keep things straight and allows you to put it together inside whatever your kitchen or bathroom is, so you know when it goes in there it's actually going to fit. So that's a big deal. There are tons of CAD products available. They're everywhere. SketchUp's a big one. SolidWorks, TurboCAD. I use TurboCAD, but it's just the one I use. There's AutoCAD, and then it goes on and on and on. There are some lower cost versions for some of these. The reason why I have TurboCAD is years ago I bought one of their early versions, and they'd allow you to go from a basic version all the way up. I bought their top version because when I started my business, I wanted to be able to do renderings. So, but you can get started on most of them. They give you a lower cost alternative. If you do choose to go the CAD route, there is a learning curve. You can't get around it. Be patient, and don't forget YouTube, because as we all know, 80% of what you need to know in life you learn in kindergarten, and the other 20% is on YouTube. So that basically meets that requirement there. So we have the lower cabinet. That's this guy right here. And these are the various parts that go in it. So you've obviously got the little doors. But then there are, it's put together with various parts. I do put a little support frame in here on the longer cabinets. You get down to about 2 feet. You don't really need that. But I put a backer behind it. This is called a toe kick on the bottom. This is the bottom. And the toe kick down there. Then you have the sides. The sides are put together, and there are dados that go on the sides, and then different joints that fit everything together. The bottom goes into a dado, and then the back also goes into a dado. That's back in the back here. So this is kind of the anatomy of what you put together. So there's several parts, and of course you adjust the length back and forth depending on what your customer requires and how the cabinet will fit in the opening and look right. So those are really that's the anatomy. This is what we'll build in the class. And then there's the upper frame. And this one typically the customers, they want to have adjustable shelves. So there's shelves. Of course, it's just a little miniature version of adjustable shelves. But those fit in there, and you can move them up and down in the little holes. And that's a really popular way to do it, because then depending on how you want to stock it up with glasses or whatever, it makes it very flexible. And then you have the usual doors. And then it's a very similar technique. It's just a narrower setup. So typically these are about 24 inches. And these are about 12 inches deep on a pretty much standard kitchen. So your countertop's 25. The cabinet itself is 24. And then typically the doors and fronts overhang. So you have an inch overhang, and then your countertop overhangs that, so you don't, your hips and so on don't get hung up on the door. And then again, like I said, these uppers are usually 12 inches. So it's typically like this, one on top of the other. And it's about an 18-inch, nowadays about 18 inches from the top of the countertop to the bottom of what we call an upper, which is the one that's above. That's been creeping up to 19 inches, getting a little taller for people with taller appliances to go under the countertops. But basically, I just let the customer drive me to whatever they need in terms of the size, the cabinets. And then the hardware I use, no, I don't work for Bloom. And this isn't a Bloom infomercial, but don't cheap out on the slides and the hinges, because if you do, you're going to regret it. I did it in the past, and I could get my slides for half the cost, but it was a disaster. And with these, for all the cabinets I've delivered, I've never had a call back to get a new cabinet, to fix anything in the cabinet. So, you know, pay the price and get some decent hardware. It doesn't have to be Bloom, but I've used Bloom 100% of the time, and I've never had a problem. So pay the money and get good hardware, because it's well worth it. So basically, I use two different styles. The styles that I have. There's the hardware slides, which are here, and these are soft close hinges. So everything now is going soft close, because that's the fancy way things work. So I would go with those because it oohs and ahs the customers, although it's becoming kind of a standard on all the high-end cabinets. So, but it's just kind of neat when you close it and it gradually closes. It just kind of a cool effect. And then this, again, you have to be pretty accurate, though. I just put this up. This is what comes in a PDF files that come from Bloom, and they call them Blumotion. But in these diagrams here, oh, can't hear this one? All right. Is this on? All right. Okay. So, so in this setup here, in the picture here, the size of the drawers have to be cut fairly precisely. You want to try to get within a 32nd of an inch. Now, it's completely doable on a decent table saw, so you want to have a contractor saw or higher in terms of getting those kind of accuracies. So there is kind of a caveat when you make these fancy slides and so on. You got to make sure that fits pretty well. So, but once you get it in there and it closes, it runs just beautifully. Then on the hinges, I really like these hinges because when you put the cabinet up and you put it on the wall, and we'll get into this in another slide, a few slides down, when it gets pushed against the wall, it can get twisted and pushed. And even though it's perfect, the doors cannot lay perfectly flat where you touch it and maybe the top rattles and the bottom doesn't. And yeah, I'm kind of maybe a perfectionist. But with these hinges, these different screws control up and down, right and left, in and out. And so you can adjust, tweak in the doors. You get about a 32nd of an inch, you can get them laying in there just perfect. So that really is very helpful to have that with this hinge here that gives you that capability. And then they have a soft close here. And then there's a activation switch down here. And I find if you have both of them on soft close and you close the door, you'll probably have to come back in 10 years before it finally closes. So it takes forever. So I generally, if you turn them both off, then it almost hits and then it closes. And if you turn one on and one off, then it gives that nice, gentle, slow close, which is kind of the cool part of doing it. So I think I always put one on and one off, but then I show the customer how to turn it on and off if they don't like the speed at which it's closing. But it's kind of neat because it gives you that flexibility. And then I'll note when you order the hinges, they talk about the overlay, and they sell 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, and I think 1 3/4 inch. And the overlay is how much the edge of the door lines up here between the edge here and how far up you are here. So like there, I'm showing a 1/2 inch overlay, which would be if this is to scale, this would be a 1/2 inch overlay. And so when you order the hinges, make sure when you design your cabinet that when you specify the overlay, you've taken that into account when you build your doors. And that's what the overlay means. It's the difference between the edge here and then where the edge of the door is here. So that's just a little note to, if you see that, to say, what is overlay? Well, that's what it is. So this is the cabinet we're going to build. Like I said, I'm going to make a 24 by 24 by 34 cabinet. I make them typically 34 and 5/8. The standard is 34 and a half, but because I worry so much about that dishwasher fitting in there and getting under the countertop, I make it 34 and an eighth just to cheat it up a little bit, so I know that the dishwasher, thank you, is going to fit in there. So I make them just a tad higher because there usually are a couple little clips there that when you slide it in, those clips raise it up just a little. So, but the standard is 34 and a half inches. So this is what we're going to build. And if I get the names of the guys who want to build the cabinets, they can let me know if they want to make it wider or shorter. I can make the drawings for that, and we'll make a different size cabinet if they want to make a different size cabinet. But really, when you build these cabinets, especially on these, you just make the sides however, the sides are exactly the same, and you just lengthen it and shorten it depending on what you want to make it fit the space you want it to fit in. Because this has kind of got to be standard so that the countertops all fit, which I don't do. The countertops come from whoever they choose to use the countertops. And then of course the handles, I never price the handles because everybody's got their own opinion on handles, so I don't get in the middle of it. Just tell me what it is, I just include it on the price of putting the handles on. So, and everyone's had all different styles and kinds. So, if you're going to build a large project, this is kind of a pointer I found on big jobs, it's an accounting issue because the high parts count. When you've got 450 parts in your shop and they all got to fit in all the different parts of the kitchen, you got to keep track of where they are because it could just be a mess. So what I've done is first thing I do is I make the face frames. And if you look here, this is a face frame, this is a face frame, and this is a face frame. And that face frame tells me, okay, hey, I'm in the far left cabinet, and then on the next one, and you lay the face frames in the pattern of the kitchen. And then as you machine the parts, so you build you build all the sides here, build these sides and the backs and the bottoms and the braces and all the things that make up the cabinets. You stack them in behind or in front of the face frame, so that face frame, you know, is that cabinet, and all the parts that go in there stack into that cabinet. And you work, and it just, for me, it helps me keep track of the parts because I found out real fast when I first big job that it turns into a nightmare. So you just gotta keep yourself organized because as you start making these parts, it gets more and more and more of them. And because it's more efficient to make a bunch of the same parts once you set up the table saw, for example, that you want to make sure you stack them up and you allot them to the different cabinets that you're making. So it just helps you keep track of the parts. Becomes a big deal if you're doing a whole kitchen. Now let's get down to reality. Now this is a woodworking organization, and everyone's used to making everything absolutely perfect. A lot of very skilled people here. They make beautiful stuff, and you can make it perfect. But there is no dwelling that I'm aware of in the galaxy that has floors, walls, and ceilings that are straight, flat, or square. It just doesn't exist. The older the house, the worse it is. The newer the house, it's only off a little, but it's still off. So you can build the most perfect cabinets, but they're pretty much worthless if you don't build into the cabinets a way to address all these realities. So let's go over some of the main causes of why all these things why this occurs. So situations 1 and 2 comes up to the drywall joints. So when they put the drywall in, there are cases here where the drywall is put in the corner here, and when they put it in there, I know I've done drywalling, I know how many people have done it, but when you put it in, you put the tape in there, and you mud behind the tape, you put the tape in there, and then you blend and smooth the tape in place, and then you gradually smooth the mud out so it gradually smooths out this way. But you've still got, on the wall, you've still got this little gap here. So the wall is not perfectly flat. The other thing is at the middle of the wall, you've got these these joints here, and the same thing, except it's not a corner, but it still goes up, and you've got a little bump there. You can't see it looking at the wall, but you can sure see it when you try to put a cabinet in, because then the cabinets are going to be rocking back and forth. And it's not perfectly straight, so you might have a little bit of waviness. That takes us to the next chart, which are situations 3 and 4. So if you're building, when a house is built, this is the foundation. I'm just picking your first floor. It can be the same on the second floor. But there are studs here that can be warped, so it can warp out. I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit. The studs can be warped, they can be twisted, and the wall can go around the studs. So you need to design for that situation so that your cabinets will fit flush against the wall. When you look at the line, you don't see gaps going back and forth. Same thing as with floor joists. The floor joist, as the house ages, it sits on the foundation right here. And as it gets older, it starts to sag, and it goes down like this. So it's up high on the foundation, and it gradually sags. So over, say, a 12-foot span, the joist kind of goes down and comes back up. Well, your cabinet's put up here against the wall, so on this part of this sag, the front of the cabinet is going to be crooked. It might be perfectly square, but when you put the cabinet on the floor, it's going to be sitting like this. So you're going to have a gap up here where the cabinet is sitting in. It's going to be crooked. So you're going to have to shim it up so it sits flush against the wall. And if the wall is crooked, you're going to have to do some sanding, and I'll show you how to do that. So these are all the things you encounter when you're putting the cabinets in. So the main thing is plan for it and design for it. And when you get on site, here are some of the things you can do to correct those issues. So in this case, what you do is you build the cabinets. In the back of the cabinet, I don't know if anybody can see it, but the back of these cabinets, and these are all built to scale, they're 1/3 scale, there's a little tab back here. In the full-size cabinets, these are 1/4 inch. So this little tab, if you could, I know you're not going to be able to see it, but it comes down, there's a tab, and it comes out and goes in. And that's, when you machine it, the back of the cabinet goes in just a little bit like this. And what that does, that gives you the ability to take a belt sander, here or here. Now, it's very careful. You have to remember to take, belt sander has to go, when the belt comes around, it has to go this way. If it's going this way, it's going to tear this all out. And if this is a painted side, you're going to have all this tear out, and it'll just look horrible. So you got to make sure when you do it, you go in this way. So you take a compass and you run down the wall. You start at the gap and you run it down while your partner's holding the cabinet, and you run it down, and it gives you different distances. And once you get that mark in there, then you set the cabinet on its side. You actually flip it down like this. You take a belt sander, and in this case, when you sand it, you're sanding it, and you sand it down to the line. So then, those are the loose drawers in there. Then you put it against the wall, you'll have this contour fit that crooked wall, whatever the case is, whether it's drywall mud or twisted joist or twisted studs, and that'll allow you to, when you put it against the wall, you'll have no gap in there at all. But the main thing to keep in mind is make sure you pay attention to which direction that belt is going. You want to make sure it's always going to the center of the cabinet so you don't get any tear out on the veneer. And then, so for the toe kick, you want to be able to install the toe kick after you've put the cabinet in. So you want to make sure that that's in there. And then the other thing is on the front of these cabinets, especially these, you want to make sure that your face frame, in the case where you have another cabinet next to it, this face frame has a little gap here. And I usually put about a 1/16 of an inch or so right here between the end of the face frame and the side of the cabinet. And that allows you, when the cabinets are put together, the cabinets might go like this, then like this, then like this, because the wall's not perfectly straight. And that gives you a little bit of movement for the cabinet, so you can pull the face frames right together, and then you'll have a gap in there. You actually can, the cabinets can move a little bit so that it'll follow the contour of the walls. If the walls are that far out, you can at least turn it in. Going out's okay, but turning in's not. So it gives you that ability to adjust for a wall that's kind of wavy from a vertical standpoint. Getting this smoothed out is if the walls are not straight from a horizontal, from a vertical, and then this is for horizontal. I guess I got that backwards. And then if you're building cabinets, the custom look I like is on cabinets where it's an end cabinet. I build it with the overlay, and then I take a pattern cutting bit with the router, and I just cut this off, sand it real smooth, and then finish it so it looks like Well, it was made to go on the end. So on these, I spray it. I don't even bother to put finish on it because nobody's going to see it. I always put finish on the bottom because as you live in the house and things get spilled and you run the mop up, the water gets underneath there. You don't want it to get in there, especially on the end pieces. I always put finish here to seal this bottom so it doesn't blister out. Now I always use plywood. I don't use particle board at all. So that also helps provide very sturdy cabinets. You can use particle board, but when I attach the face frame to the sides, I have screws that go in at the top, but on the sides, these are just straight glued. And when I use the plywood, I make sure that I use plywood without MDF. If you do have plywood with MDF, you can do that, but now you've got to do a mortise and tenon joint here to give you the strength so it'll hold it'll really bond the face frame. But if you have plywood with no MDF, you're great. Now these panels here, I have used 1/4-inch plywood, but they've made the veneer so thin that any imperfections, when you finish it, and I spray my finishes and they're real smooth, but you can look at it, and if you look at it at an angle, you can see some of the grain that's underneath that's beneath the veneer, at least on the Baltic birch plywoods and the ones that have a fairly thin veneer. So what I use is I actually do use MDF inside the door. So it is protected by hardwood going around here, but then the MDF is captured. Now, of course, if it's not painted and it's actual, it's walnut or it's cherry or something, then of course you got to use the appropriate plywood with that or do a reveal. So far, these are pretty much the style everybody wants. They want either Mission or they want Shaker, and that's pretty much it. I'm sure that'll all go out of style, and we'll go back to raised panels and reveals and stuff, but at least as of now, that's the style. That's what everybody goes with. So that's why I put these two little models here, or basically follow the style that I get the most demand for. Don't worry about those loose shelves in there. So again, I just talked about the uneven walls. If you look at it, what that does is it gives you this gap here all the way down, so the cabinets can be pinched together or moved apart, and then you use screws here and you drive them in from the side, and that locks the face frames together, so you get that nice closed look there between the two cabinets. And then when you put the cabinets together, what I do is on the toe kicks, this is an example here, but if you had 2 or 3 cabinets, I would make a single toe kick that goes the whole length. So then when you put the toe kick in there, then it all looks like one solid cabinet, and it takes your eyes away from the seam here. You don't see any seam down there. It's a little nit, I guess, but I like to make it really look good for the customers. And then the other thing is, okay, so then we got this joist issue where the joist gradually goes down and comes back up. So the cabinet, when it's sitting on the floor, it's going to have this gap here, and you're going to have to shim it up. But what you do is when you make the cabinet, it has a backer here, but the toe kick's not installed, and I never install the toe kick early. Make sure the cabinets are in there, they're straight, they're square, everything's done, you've attached everything together. And the very last step, you put the toe kick in. And the reason why is down here, as the joist goes low, you're going to have a gap. Just drop the toe kick to cover that gap. It'll go away, and it'll just be this real nice clean joint. And so even if the joist has settled and you've shimmed up the cabinet to make it flat for the countertop, when you put this in here, when you look, your sight view down here is going to be such that you won't see any gap up here, and you won't see any gap down here, even though there is one up on the top of the toe kick. So when you put it in there, there might be a gap here. In fact, there is on this one. There is a gap. But if you set it down and you look at it and you're standing there, you're not going to see it. You're just going to see a perfect seam. So always put the toe kick in last so you can cover that up. Because as every experienced woodworker knows, the most important skill to have in woodworking is have a way to really cover up your mistakes. And that really does help you out. So there's an example. So finally, if anybody's got any questions, if they send any comments in, then I'm ready to answer questions. I probably didn't go into all the details on building the cabinets, which we'll cover in the class, but those are really big issues that you come into when you're trying to put something in a house. So anyway, any questions? Okay, I guess I've surprised everybody, or
Hey, John, you know what? There's about a 30-second delay, so maybe you can just chill and talk about something else while we wait.
okay. Well, I like to talk anyway.
Did you ever put drawers in the kick plate?
I've never put drawers down here in the kick plate. I've got my first request for that, but it's all completely doable. You can put them pretty much anywhere. When I build a cabinet, really what I do, the first thing I do is I build the face frame, because it tells me, okay, the cabinet tells me I want to be this. And so when you build this face frame, it tells you how it's going to be laid out, and then you build the box. The box is this, all this stuff in the back here that you may or may not see. And then I always put a little frame up here on the top. This is something I got from Scott Wonder. I worked with him for a few years building cabinets. And so it just frames it in real nice. And then it gives you an ability to drive screws in here so you can attach the face frame to the box. And then I also attach before you put these, not the toe kick, you do that last, but these supports behind the toe kick, before you put those in, drive screws in here, attaches to the bottom. So the only thing you're really relying on the glue for is along the sides here. And I've never had, when you use regular plywood, I've never had glue fail. So in fact, I even glued butt jointed, like for example, if I'm going to paint it, I use poplar because it's a real nice wood to work with, and it wouldn't be great to be finished, but it's great when you spray it. And I did this joint, and surprisingly, this butt joint is amazingly strong. Yes, I was able to break it, and when I did break it, it did break along the joint, but I had to use clamps to really pull it apart. So first question?
Yeah, so Mike Peary asks, on top of the cabinets, do you leave room for lights under the cabinet?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's an excellent question. So on these this is an upper, and if you look at the bottom down here, there's a gap. And I usually try to find out if somebody's put lights in there, and most of everyone's using LED lights. And so usually an inch gap here between the bottom here and the bottom of the base or bottom, that gap in here will allow you to put those lights in there, and then you can actually, a lot of them you stick along the side, they have those strips of lights, and then there's also actual fixtures. And depending on how people like it, some of them bring it in the wire here, the other ones would bring the wire, if there's a gap here, you bring the wire through the gap, drill in here, and then run the light along the front. I kind of like that a little better because you really can't see the light. It just magically appears. So yes, this gap, you go for an inch. I like to go for an inch if you're going to use lighting, if I know about it ahead of time. Typically, this gap here is about 3/4 of an inch on an average cabinet build, and a lot of lights would still fit that, but the inch gives you a little extra way to hide it. So the whole idea is when you turn on the inner cabinet lights, you want to make it appear out of nowhere. So that's the fun part about it. So really, you want everything to look cool. I mean, style points truly count, and that's an important part of having something look good. Any other ones?
Not yet.
Okay. So those are basically the big things that I do. For the interior of the cabinets, especially on a lower, these hinges don't let it open very far, but inside the bottom down here, I would recommend, okay. Okay, so inside the cabinets here, I would make sure that you put either a varnish or some kind of a polymer. Don't use an oil, don't use shellac, use a polymer of some kind, and don't use certain lacquers. Some are fine, but remember, your customer, you are gonna put your cleaning solutions and all that stuff down there. So you want to have something that's pretty durable inside here. Now the outside, I'll spray. It's a modified lacquer. This is a modified lacquer, and it dries real nice and hard. But you can use all kinds of paints here. But inside here, use a polymer. Don't go with any shellac or anything, because you put a Windex or something, the bottle leaks or something, something's gonna leak, and it's just gonna destroy the finish. So I use a conversion varnish, which is, I had a case where I had to remove some conversion varnish because I got the color wrong, and I put paint stripper on it. And it not only didn't remove the varnish, it didn't even affect the sheen of the varnish. So I wound up having to sand it off. The only way to get it off is to mechanically remove it. And that's the kind of stuff you're looking for. Polyurethanes are really tough too. Those you can get with a paint remover. I didn't think conversion varnish could do it, but it's unbelievably. The only thing that can kill it is high strength sulfuric acid, and I don't really like to deal with that. But, so anyway, but use a polymer in here so that when you spill stuff, because life happens, then it won't destroy this. And I usually use a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch base here so it doesn't sag if it gets wet, and it makes for a very strong cabinet.
Jeff Poles asks, do you have any experience or recommendations for CAD programs with parametric design features?
Well, I use TurboCAD. I have their higher end, and it has all the parametric features you can possibly use. The one that I got, it's their platinum version. It's kind of overkill. I could design anything from submarines to spaceships to washing machines and even furniture. So it's got massive overkill. And I bought it because I wanted to be able to do renderings so that I can give my customers a picture of the kitchen, and this is what it's going to look like. And then when it's done, it looks just like the picture. So that's the reason why I got it, but it does have parametrics. And if we go back to when we're designing the drawers, I actually have parametrics. So I enter, one more, too fast. Let's let it settle down. So when you're building these drawers, you want to get within a 32nd of an inch. And so when I do the design, and because the cabinets can vary in width and the drawers can have to change with it, and it's got to be within a 32nd of an inch. So I actually have parametrics, and this is again, I use TurboCAD. I enter the size of the opening, the depth of the drawer, and the height of the drawer. And it comes up, it gives me all the dimensions. I put it onto paper space, and if I build it to those numbers, goes right in there, the slide goes in, and everything fits perfect. So I've pre-done all that, but that's in TurboCAD Platinum, which is their high-end. I'm sure there are I know there are other CAD programs that do it. I'm just not sure how far down. Again, TurboCAD has Standard, Deluxe, Pro, and Platinum. So I don't know how far down the stack you go. I don't know if you can go down to the basic version or not. And I don't know, does SketchUp do parametrics?
I don't know.
Okay, so, but yes, it is very helpful because, like I said, when I do these drawers and I've got to make all these drawers fit. You have a certain thickness here, and you got thickness here, and then you got to make this. It goes on and on. You have to make all that stuff work and do all the calculations. And with the parametrics, you just put the number in there, and boom, presto change it. You got your drawer. So that works out really slick. It does it on 2D, so I do have to. I do have to extrude the height of the drawer, but I don't care about that. I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. So when they put it in here, because when I do the drawers, they're all dovetailed and everything, and if it doesn't fit, there'll be a lot of crying and possibly cursing. So that's why I do that, because then I know that it's going to be right. And that's the reason why I really like the CAD, because you can avoid those things, because I'm very experienced, and the way to get experience is to make all the mistakes. That's the difference between an experienced person and an inexperienced. If you're experienced, you've already made all the mistakes. And so, and I've made a few.
So someone has asked how many people will be in the November 28th, 29th class.
And so,
I can tell you it's fully booked. You have 6 out of 6 people, but you might talk about whether or not
Okay.
you're interested in doing it again.
yeah, well, we can certainly do it. Yes, all the people. So the class is full, and yeah, we can do it again. That's no problem. The main thing, if I can get their names, I'd like to have their names, because if they want to make it, what I have set up here is a 24-24 cabinet. But if you want to have something that's 30-24, then we can build one of those. We can build the different length. I don't want to do the upper, because then we get sidetracked on lots of designs, and I want to be able to set up the table saw, demonstrate it, build a part, and then go to the next one. If we want to do an uppers class, that's fine, but I would like to only do one style at a time. And then but we can make it varying width. And what I'll do is I'll just use the TurboCAD and I'll just make it whatever width you want. And then you can see how it works. And then when I get the design, if you're a SketchUp user, TurboCAD will go directly into SketchUp. SketchUp will go into TurboCAD. They go back and forth like, doesn't matter. It's not like going between Word and WordPerfect where you got all kinds of weird things. It works really well. So when we build this and you get your design, I can send you the file as a SketchUp if you want to use a SketchUp. So, and that's it. We all quiet? Okay. Well, thank you for your time. And that's cabinet building.
Don, that was it. Quiet now. Don, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. And that's it for the program tonight. We'll see you all next month. One PS, everybody go vote. Good night.